Welcome back to the Spoken Truth podcast. We have the continuation of the play-in tomorrow, which we will see some of those teams fight to, play the eighth seed. But some of this stuff we're giving our opinion on it as far as who we think is going to win those games tomorrow. But some of these matchups are already said that we're going to get our take on it. But first, let's start with these picks here. We're going to start with the Western Conference. We have the number one OKC Thunder potentially facing off against the Sacramento Kings. The reason why I say potentially because we know the Zion injury, the news came out from that injury that he's not going to be a part of the game. So we're both assuming that the Sacramento Kings is going to get that victory. Um, Chaz, what are your thoughts on that matchup and who do you have winning it?
Yeah, I mean, we'll wait and see, but I think the Thunder would probably beat either the Kings or the Pelicans. Coming into the play-in, coming into this week, I felt confident that OKC was likely going to advance no matter who they faced. If it would have been the Lakers or the Warriors, I think there would have been some concern. But if we're talking Kings, Pelicans, maybe they can take a game or two at most off the Thunder, but I think OKC advances. I mean, we're talking about a team leads the conference, with almost 120 points per game. I think this team is one of the best, even though they don't really have that playoff experience just yet. I think it's going to be enough to at least get by through this first round. So I got the Thunder advancing in probably five, no matter who they face.
Assuming that they're going to face the Sacramento Kings, I do have that going five as well. I believe, well, Sabonis as well as Darren Fox, they can get one game off this team. But this team is they're they're young, they're not experienced, but really not the Sacramento Kings are not really experienced either. So they had that playoff that series with the Golden State Warriors last year, a thrilling 7-game series, probably the best series last year in all of the NBA playoffs. But I just don't think the Kings possess enough to compete with this OKC team. So I do have the OKC, gentleman sweep. I do have them, winning in the five, and making their way to the second round in the playoffs. Let's move on to the matchup that seemed like it's been made forever ago, but it hasn't really been that long. The Los Angeles Clippers versus the Dallas Mavericks. That's one of the most interesting first round matchups that we have going on this year. Chaz, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, this is definitely one of the series that I'm most excited for. I mean, this is a series that we saw in 2020 and 2021. So we're kind of getting the third series out of these two teams, even though they both obviously look a lot differently. Here a few years later with Kyrie Irving in the mix for the Mavericks. He's been phenomenal this season, about 26, 5 and 5. Obviously, Luka being an MVP candidate. I think they're going to be incredibly hard to stop, even for a Clippers team that can play at a high level defensively. I'm just a little bit worried about the Clippers, obviously with Kawhi Leonard knee injury and the James Harden hamstring injury.
Yeah.
That's something we always talk about with the Clippers. I think if they were at full strength, we saw, when they traded for Harden, they lost their first 6 games, and then they went on a 25-6 stretch where I think you could argue that they were the best team in the league for that stretch, and they haven't really been at that level since. Since then, the Mavericks have actually been one of the hottest teams in the league besides the last 2 games where Luka and Kyrie didn't play. In the 18 games prior to that, the Mavericks were 16-2. They have the second best record in the entire league in clutch games. So I'm going to take the Mavericks. I think this one could go 6 or 7, depending on how good the Clippers look and how healthy they are. So I'm gonna lean and say Mavericks in 6. But I could see this going 7.
Yeah, I guess we're both two for two here. I do have the Mavericks taking a series in seven. I think the concerns are monumental for the Clippers as far as the health. The as we said last week, as I said last week, the injuries have always seemed to plague this team, no matter who's on it. When you look at a hindsight, I've said it, about a year ago. That's even before the James Harden trade, is that this team on paper is the best team in all of the NBA from top to bottom. They have the best bench, they have the best starting five, from top to bottom. Now, this year obviously it didn't play out that way, because the Celtics just ram-shopped over the Eastern Conference and as well as the West. But for this matchup, you got the dynamic duo of Luke and Kyrie. As I said last week, maybe the best scoring duo in NBA history. I just don't see how the Clippers, with all of the injuries they got going on, overcome. um, Luca, who has had their number for a long time. Obviously, he hasn't won them all the series, but that wasn't a lack of him. That was a lack of team. This is the best team Luke has ever played on. And with that being said, you pair Luca and Kyrie and with already stacked team, you have to get a lot give a lot of credit to Mark Cuban as well by going out in free agency and picking up the pieces that they need in order to make this team a championship level team. So with all that being said, I do have the Mavs winning this series in seven. So it seems like we're two for two. We're both on even sides here.
Yeah, I
Um,
think you're spot on. Not only that this is the best team that Luka's been on, but Kyrie is also the best running mate that he's had.
Ever had.
He's had guys
Mhm.
like Jalen Brunson and Kristaps Porzingis, but Brunson was not the player that he is now, obviously back then. And
Right.
Porzingis was kind of struggling in his role at the time when he was with the Mavericks. Obviously, very talented, but Luka and Kyrie are averaging like 60 points per game together. Even though the
Right.
Clippers they won 2 out of the 3 against the Mavericks during the regular season, but Kyrie didn't play in one of the games, and they
Mhm.
haven't played at all since the trade deadline when the Mavericks got Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington. So with both teams looking the way they are right now, I think I would have to take the Mavericks.
Absolutely. I think we both have you have the Mavs in six or seven. I got the Mavs in seven.
Okay.
We're moving on to your team that you cover right now, the Timberwolves versus the Phoenix Suns. This is a tricky one because this is probably the one that I kind of went back and forth. I could see the series going either way, depending on how, Kevin Durant plays, and also how Karl Anthony Towns look coming back from injury. What kind of effect will he have on this team? I don't really have a lot of questions about Anthony Edwards or Booker. And those are the kind of the two common denominators where I really don't have any questions about. The other questions are, believe it or not, are coming from Durant and obviously Ronnie Towns, who I just mentioned. So, what are your thoughts on that series and who do you have?
Yeah, just like you said, this is one that I've kind of gone back and forth with. Timberwolves
Mhm.
are the highest ranked defense in the entire league, obviously with Rudy Gobert holding down the paint. You have guys like Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walkers, all high level perimeter defenders. But I think the most important thing that you mentioned was that Karl Anthony Towns is still getting acclimated since returning from that injury. He was out almost a
Right.
month with that knee injury. I think if he was at full strength. He didn't miss any time. The Timberwolves were on a roll. They would actually probably have been the number 1 seed if Cat didn't miss
Yeah.
any time. But with him still trying to get back into the mix, I think I'm leaning towards Suns right now. I could see this series going either way, but
Mm.
throughout the regular season, Phoenix was 3-0 against Minnesota, including that final game of the regular season where both teams were clearly trying to win it. They both had a lot at stake. The Suns needed it to get that sixth spot. The Timberwolves still had a chance to get number 1, and Phoenix went
Right.
into Minnesota and controlled that game from the tip-off. So I'm leaning Phoenix. I think they've done a very good job of shutting down the Timberwolves offense throughout the regular season in those 3 matchups. Anthony Edwards is a guy that averages 25, 26 points per game. I think against Phoenix, he averaged around 15. And then Karl Anthony
Right.
Towns is a guy that averages 20, can give you 30 on any given night. He averaged about 18 against the Suns.
Yeah.
Suns aren't a great defense, but they found a way to shut down the Timberwolves offense. When a guy like Anthony Edwards is trying to operate in the pick and roll, a lot of times the Suns would come up and hedge him very hard, try and make him a playmaker instead of a scorer. That's something that he's improved at, but it's not still the biggest part of his game. I think if you do that, that's probably the best way to shut down Edwards. So I'm leaning Suns, but I'm going to say in seven. I could definitely see this series going either way, though. What are you thinking?
So I believe this matchup is going to come down, and sometimes it plays out this way, but a lot of times it don't. I think this matchup, when you look back at it, when it's over, I think this is going to come down to 1 to 2, potentially 3 possessions that altered the game, and that swung the series one way or the other. Um, and I'm thinking the Wolves will make those plays that will swing it one way or the other. I have the Wolves in seven.
Okay.
Um, so the reason why I'm saying the Wolves in seven is because some of the reasons that you said, how they seem not to play very well, particularly against the Phoenix Suns. It is not that the Phoenix Suns are a really good defensive team. They just tend to struggle with the style of ball that the Phoenix Suns are playing. I think for this series, it might become a shootout, and you don't necessarily want to get in a shootout with KD and Booker. And so, how do you combat those two as well as Bill? How do you combat that big three, that three-headed monster, with what you have? You're going to have to use your size because that's the best advantage that you have. So it's going to be really pivotal that Karl Anthony Towns is as healthy as he can possibly be, as well as pairing with Gobert to be able to combat that scoring ability that they're going to have. It's going to be, to me, it's going to be an inside-outside game. The Phoenix Suns are going to focus heavy on the perimeter. The Timberwolves are going to have to dominate the game how they usually do and focus inside the paint. And obviously, we know three is better than two, but you have to bark on Phoenix getting cold in sporadic intervals in these games in order for you to pick up the victory. And in doing so, you still have an Anthony Edwards who is a playmaker to the umpteenth degree, and we're going to get into the superstar conversation later. Where did he fit in that category? But you still have someone that could take over a game at any time. I believe he's better than Devin Booker. That's just where I'm going with it. But also, the factor is going to be Kevin Durant because he's the one person on the floor that no one can contend with. So how does he play in this series is going to tell me a lot, not just about him, but where and how far Phoenix can go in these playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point because as great of a player as Kevin Durant is, and we all know the scoring ability that he did really struggle in that Boston Celtics series a few years back with the Brooklyn Nets. And this Timberwolves
Mhm.
team kind of has a similar makeup in their perimeter defense in that they're going to get into you. You know, a
Mhm.
guy like Jaden
Yeah,
McDaniels is I'm assuming is who's going to be his, main assignment. But no matter
yeah.
who's on KD, he's going to be seeing a very high level defender pretty much all series. So I think
I
KD.
expect heavy traps on Kevin Durant from open and tap.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And they're going to try and get under his skin. They're going to if he puts the ball on the floor, they're going to try and get under him, make him uncomfortable, just like we saw the Celtics do a few years ago. If they're able to do that and have success at it, I think the Timberwolves win this series. It's just a
Mhm.
matter of can they do that in 4 out of 7 games. So I could see
Abs-
one going either way. I think game one and game two are going to be very critical. If the Timberwolves can find
Pivotal.
a way to go up 2-0, I think that's probably going to
Mhm.
be enough to win the series. But if Phoenix can steal one of those first 2 games, then I think they got a pretty good chance to win it.
I also think I'm glad you mentioned that because I also think it's important for that Cavs and Mavs game, for the Mavs to steal one of the first two games. And if they steal both of them, I think this series could be over rather quickly if they can get both of those games.
Mhm.
But the Clippers have to. I believe they have the better record. I believe they have the better record. So they need to serve home, at least go back going to Dallas 1-1.
Yeah.
And so I think that also pertains to the Wolves and Suns series, like you said. So that is an amazing point that you just made. Moving on to probably the most highly anticipated series that we've seen in the last 2 years outside of Steph versus LeBron. I don't even call it Warriors and Lakers anymore. It's Steph and LeBron because the marketing that
Yeah.
they did last year was like it's oh my goodness, like it's the Warriors and Lakers, right? Not Steph and LeBron. Anyways, you know, that series is one that I'm looking forward to, but it may be the quickest one.
Think
It
so?
might be the quickest. I do. I think I got the Nuggets in the five. I think the Lakers avoid it. I think the Lakers avoid the sweep of this go around. Like Anthony Davis is always going to be the key in this series. You have to match Jokic. You don't have to match him point for point, rebound for rebound. The one thing that Jokic does so well is see the floor. So it's not equivalent if Jokic has 26, 14, and 11 assists, and Anthony Davis has 25 and 10. Jokic is still winning that battle because he sees the floor so well that is making up for all of the other things that they call themselves matching each other on. I think this is going to be pivotal. I expect to see LeBron a lot on Jokic this series. The question for the Nuggets is always going to be the others. It's going to be Aaron Gordon. It's going to be Porter. It's going to be the others that get them over the hump in this series. I believe the Nuggets have the better duo. I'm not in a regular one-off. I'm not taking Murray over AD, but in this series, in this situation with the team that they have the better duo. And Jokic is by far the best player on the planet. And it's not really close at this point. But I think with their ability to play offense at an efficient rate and to be able to hold LeBron to you're not going to contain LeBron, you're not going to stop him, but to be able to hold LeBron under a certain amount of points, I want to say 30 to 40, because I think last year he averaged almost 35. If I'm not, I think even more than that. And it still wasn't enough. He played the first half, the entire first half of game four was spent, the second half, it just wasn't enough. The Lakers simply do not have enough to contend with the Nuggets. I will say this, they got them early. The Nuggets for the last couple of years tend to start off a little slow. That's the biggest advantage the Lakers have right now. You could look at them and say, okay, they don't start off fast, but the Nuggets know they're facing the Lakers, so they might start off fast. So that's the only bright side. That's the only upside I see. I don't think there's a scheme that Darvin Ham could put together that will beat this team. I just simply don't see it. In my opinion, I don't care if it was the first round or it was a month from now. I believe the Nuggets are just the better team, and I got them in five.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. You have the best player on the floor, and I think you have the better team overall. So I'm going to take the Nuggets in five as well. Obviously swept them last year in the conference finals, and then the Nuggets are 3-0 against the Lakers this season as well. I think they're about 6.5 point favorites prior to game one. Um,
Mhm.
I agree with what you said. I think LeBron's going to have to guard Jokic from time to time. We saw a lot in the series last year. They would have LeBron or Rui Hachimura guard
Yeah.
Jokic and then have AD kind of as a floater, either come over and double, or if Jokic got deep in the paint, then he would come over and try and contest, from the middle usually. That's a strategy, and at times it worked, but for the most part, you're not going to be able to slow down Jokic. I just think it's hard to pick against them. I do think that, like you said, getting them early is a factor. I think by the time the Lakers played the Nuggets last year, they were kind of spent. You know,
Yeah.
they were running on fumes. They had gone through the play-in and then two series, including a pretty grueling second round series against the Warriors, at least this year. Um, and not to mention that LeBron also had a foot injury for the second half of last season, and you could definitely see that was impacting him. So I think the Lakers are in a better position to compete this year, but I don't see them taking any more than 2 games off them. I say they probably get one, maybe two at the most. But I'm going to take Nuggets in five as well. Jokic top 10 in points, rebounds, and assists. He's the overwhelming favorite to win a third MVP. LeBron has been playing at an extremely high level since the All-Star break. I think he's the only player in the league that's averaged more than 25 on over 50% from the field and 40% from three. So LeBron's been playing great, but he's going to probably have to be even better than that for them to have a chance to compete. And I just don't
Yeah.
really see them doing that. So I'm going to take Nuggets in five as well.
Okay. Um, so that's the Western Conference we have, guys. Those are the matchups that we think going to happen. The only one that's legit not certified yet is that Kings matchup, OKC and the Kings, because they do have a game to play against the Pelicans tomorrow night, and the winner will face OKC. But we're both consuming with the news that we received today that the Kings will win that game. Moving on to the Eastern Conference, I think this matchup is kind of self-explanatory. I don't even think we have to dive a lot into it. We got the Celtics, and we're going based off assumption again that it's going to be the Chicago Bulls, because they're facing off against Atlanta. No, the Miami. I'm sorry, they're facing off against Miami, and Jimmy Butler is injured.
Yep.
I don't think he's going to be available tomorrow, and
Yeah.
so I have the Celtics in the I have the Celtics in the sweep. Maybe one game from the Bulls, but I believe the Celtics will take care of business and take care of business rather early.
Yeah, I agree with you. First, I want to say that it does kind of suck with the play-in. As much as I love the play-in tournament, I think it's been great, for the postseason the last few years. It really sucks that Zion gets hurt in one of the best games of
Yeah,
his career, 40 points against the Lakers, 3 minutes to go in a tie game, and he has to leave. And not only that, but then he's going to miss the second play-in. And then Jimmy Butler, obviously the most important player on the Heat, is also going to miss their second play-in game. So, like you said, we're assuming that the Bulls win that game and eliminate the Heat, which I think if Jimmy Butler was out there, we would all be thinking that the Heat would win that and
yeah.
would go on to face the Celtics. I will mention
Mhm.
that Alex Caruso is out for the Bulls as well, though, and he's a key piece. So maybe the Heat are able to squeak that out and get on to clinch the 8 seed. But I don't, no matter who it is, I think we have the Celtics probably in a sweep.
Yeah, in the
They
script.
face the
Yeah,
Bulls, I'm going to take them in four. If they face the Heat or something, maybe we talk about in five.
maybe five.
Yeah, but
maybe.
I mean, this is a Celtics team that has run away with it, 64-18. Top five in the league in points and top five in defensive efficiency. Tatum and Brown averaging over 50 points per game. They have five guys that average double-digit points and five rebounds a game. I mean, they have great depth, great players at the top as well. Kristaps Porzingis has been phenomenal in his first season with the team. So I got the
Yeah.
Celtics skating by in this one for sure.
All right, moving on to the Cavs and the Magic. This is another one that um I guess is interesting. Um,
You guess?
but I'm yeah, I guess it's interesting, but obviously I'm going to go with the Cavs to win this. I think the Magic have a bright future. I think they are up and coming team. They have, they are in the playoffs. But I do have the Cavs winning that in six. It seemed like the last game of the season that the Cavs were pushing for this. It was very evident that they were pushing for this. So I do have the Cavs in six.
It doesn't sound like you're going to be watching much of this series.
I'm not. I'm just be quite frank, honestly with you. No, absolutely not. I might catch one or two games of this series, but man, they're playing four games and they're playing. Saturday is four games, then Sunday is four games. It's just I'm not about to watch the Cavs and the Magic. I'm going to go to sleep at some point in time. So yeah, that'd be a game that I just go to sleep on.
So you got the Cavs. How many games though? You think that the Magic can actually make this a series?
Six. I got the Cavs in six. I think the Mavs can win two games. Then the Magic can win two games.
Yeah, I mean, I think as much as you said the Magic lacked that experience, I do think these teams are pretty even. I mean, the Magic are a great defensive team ever since Jonathan Isaac returned. They are one of the best defensive teams in the entire league. Both teams are good at home and or I'm sorry, below average on the road. So, if they're able to protect home court, maybe we could see this series going 6 or 7. It's hard to
Mhm.
tell with the Cavs because I think they're probably the better team, but we haven't seen Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell play together in months, with both of
Yeah.
them dealing with injuries. So it's hard to really tell. I think it's really impressive for the Magic to even get to this point. I mean, with Paolo Banchero only being in his second season and you're already the fifth seed, I feel like they have pretty high potential over the next few years. But with the Cavs taking that loss in the first round last year, I think they're going to kind of have the momentum to advance to the second round this year. So I'm going to go Cavs in 6.
I want to ask the NBA community: are we going to watch this series?
I'm
We ain't watch it. Guys, I
gonna
know you.
watch it as long as there's no other game on.
You're not gonna. You on. That's the only way you're gonna watch this game. Any of these games, if there's no other game on.
So I think it's
No,
the game on Saturday, so it's gonna be the only game on for a while.
I think it's the first. If I'm not mistaken, it might be the first or the second game that come on.
Yeah.
And so I hit the gym, get myself together, prepare for the Sunday and Monday, prepare for the work week and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And then I catch the second, third, and fourth game. Yeah. So that's how I do. Yeah, but I'm gonna go to the gym during this game. Get that Saturday
Saturday
session in.
afternoon. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. This Bucks and Pacers series is an interesting one because Giannis is reported not going to start at the beginning of the series.
Mhm.
And to me, it's kind of like that Clippers and that Wolves series. I believe the Bucks. I believe if the Pacers win the first two, this series is a wrap. If they go back to Indiana, well, I believe Indiana, and they're up 2-0, I think the series is over. I do have the Pacers winning in six, but if they steal the first two, I have it over in five. So I really think it depends on what happens in the first two games.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I also think obviously Giannis, if he's able to return by game 2 or game 3, you obviously feel better about Milwaukee's chances. If we're talking about him not getting back until like game 4 or game 5, the Pacers
Mhm.
could already have the series in hand. So, we're talking about a guy that's averaging 30, 12, and 6. Like, it's hard to replace that production. He's one of the best players in the league. And not only
Yeah.
that, but even when he was healthy, we saw the Pacers had a lot of success against the Bucks this season. They won 4 out of 5. They kind of embarrassed them on a big stage in the in-season tournament semifinals where everybody was picking the Bucks, to play the Lakers, and then all of a sudden the Pacers steal that game in Vegas. Um, and the Bucks got them back a few weeks later, but that was the only time the Bucks beat them all season. Pacers,
Mhm.
best offense in the league, 123 points per game. but they give up 120, so it's hard to trust that. I will say,
No, no defense.
yeah, not at all. They get up and down, but they don't play much defense. If they're hitting from three, they can beat just about anybody in the league. But we've seen if they're not, they can lose to pretty much anybody as well. So I think if Giannis is back by game three, I'm taking the Bucks in seven. If Giannis is back any later than that, then I'm taking the Pacers in six.
Are you expecting the Bucks to split?
Yeah, I think if the Bucks split the first two and then Giannis returns for game three, they got a pretty good chance. But
Okay.
if they either lose both of those or Giannis isn't back till later, then I got the Pacers in six.
If the Pacers go up 2-0 and Giannis come back game three, do you have the Pacers?
Yeah, that's the one that's like right in the in between where it'd be hard, but I would probably lean Pacers just because then we're talking the Bucks would have to win 4 out of 5. But
Mhm.
I don't know. That's a hard question. I think I'd probably lean Pacers in seven, maybe at that point, 6 or 7. But I think the Bucks have a pretty good chance to split those first two, even if Giannis doesn't play. Dame would probably have to have like a 35, 40 point game, and Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez would have to play well, Bobby Portis. So yeah, those first two games, the Bucks need to win at least one, and then Giannis has to be back, I think, for game three.
Gotcha. So you think that 2-0 lead is kind of a lot to overcome for the Bucks at that point in time if
Yeah,
Giannis come back for
I
game
wouldn't say they would have no chance, but that'd be really hard to do, especially against a team that you haven't had much success against all season. So
six?
yeah, if they split those first two though, and Giannis plays game three, I'll say Bucks in seven. Otherwise, I'm taking Pacers in six.
All right. Now to probably what's going to be the best first round series in the Eastern Conference. You got the New York Knickerbockers versus Joel Embiid and the 76ers. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I think this is going to be a tough series.
Hmm.
This is probably the hardest pick to pick in the Eastern Conference, but I'm going to go with the Knicks in seven. I'm going to pick the Knicks in seven. I just don't like the injury with Embiid right now, and I know he still has it. I know it still bothers him. You could tell last night game that he's still trying to overexert on that other leg to compensate for that injury. I just don't. He's just not healthy. Um, and I think if this wasn't the playoffs, I don't think he'd be playing. I really don't. And so I think the Knicks, although in this series, by far, Joel Embiid is the best player in this series. He is compromised, and they've got help from the Kelly Oubre's of the world and others to help try to take the load off him. I just think the Knicks they've been on somewhat of a roll the last month of the season. They feel confident going in to this playoff series. They haven't won a playoff series in is forever. I think they're going to be ready. I think Madison Square Garden is going to be pumped. I think Jalen Brunson is going to get it done. I got the Knicks in seven.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. The Knicks finished the regular season on a 5 game winning streak to clinch that second seed. Jalen Brunson's, I think he is, on the fringe MVP conversation. He's not going to win it, but he's going to receive votes. He's probably going to be second team All NBA. Since OG Anunoby was dealt to the Knicks and he's been available, they're 18-3, I believe, in games that he's played. A lot of those were with Julius Randle, so him not being available, having the season-ending injury, that is a factor as well. But it's hard to trust Philadelphia right now with the way that they looked. They scraped by against the Heat last night, and they've won 9 in a row. Since Embiid returned, they have not lost yet, but they haven't played very high-level competition. And then last night we saw them just squeak by a game that they really didn't play well in, and Embiid ends up with 23 and 15, but it was kind of a struggle to get to that point.
Really
And
didn't play the first three quarters.
yeah, exactly. He came on late. He had the trail three-pointer that was huge, and then the and one that put them up as well. He also made some really key passes. He had a
Yeah.
swing pass to Nick Batum, and then he also had a dump down to Kelly Oubre for an and one. Like, I mean, Embiid was incredibly clutch, and he propelled them to that win. Alongside Nick Batum, honestly, Nicholas Batum was phenomenal last night. I mean, we're talking about a guy that averages like 4 points a game, and he had 20 points and 6 out of 10, I believe, from 3 point range. He also had a huge block on Tyler Hero late in the game to kind of seal the win. So I mean, you have guys like Nick Batum and Kelly Oubre, like you mentioned, and Buddy Hield, who can help you win games, but they're not going to bring it every single game. So I don't know.
Right.
It's hard for me to trust it. I am going to take a chance, though. I'm going to say 76ers in seven. I think if the Knicks had Julius Randle, I'd pick them probably in seven. But with both teams dealing with injuries, I think that maybe. We're talking maybe 3 to 4 games into the series, Embiid starts to get his legs under him, and we start to see the player that we know he is. And if the 76ers are, down 2-1 going to game four, I think they got a pretty good chance to even it up and then maybe win in seven. So I'm going to take 76ers with the upset.
If if the 76ers can get one of two, if they can split, I think their chances of winning this series gets exponentially higher
Mhm.
if they split the first two games. I think the problem is that the injury to me is so uncertain that we don't know how the others are going to respond in this situation. Now we've seen that they haven't lost since Joel Embiid been back in the lineup. They're 9-0.
Mhm.
But when it's get time for playoff time, and I know they have a lot of experience on that team that's been in situations like this. I think if they can steal one, I believe this series becomes almost even. I'm under the impression that I think the Knicks are going to get the first two, and then Philly will fight their way back into this series, but it'd be too late. It won't be enough because the Knicks are still going to be rolling.
Mhm.
And so I think having home court advantage, having game seven at Madison Square Garden it helps make my case that the Knicks is going to win this series. If this was Philly and Philly had a better record and they had home court advantage, it'd be a completely different story. Because I believe that Philly crowd, I believe that team could feed off that Philly crowd for at least 1 or 2 games. And then I believe Joel Embiid can at least get you 1 to 2 games by himself. So in that scenario, I will have Philly winning. But because they don't have home court advantage, I see it going the other way.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a factor. We're talking about two of the rowdiest crowds in the entire league. So, if they are backing their team, I think that could sway a game. Um, it's hard to say with the injuries mixed in. I think you're right on that. A lot of these series, if the underdog can steal one of those first two games, that could go a long way in potentially pulling off an upset. So, a lot of these series that we're thinking are probably going 6 or 7, those first two
Mhm.
games are always critical.
Gotcha. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, those are our 2024 first round picks for the playoffs, guys. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Make sure you follow us on YouTube. Next, we're going to get into, is the dynasty over for the Golden State Warriors? So will we ever see Steph? I was about to say KD. Steph, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green again on the same court.